Hey guys, I just took part in Quasar.Conf, the first Quasar live conference, and this is my talk in which I explain how to integrate the 5 core PWA features into a Quasar progressive web app. Hope you enjoy it. Make sure you leave a comment to let me know what you think, and don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
So if you can share your screen, I'll put it in and then off you go. All right. Yep, we got it.
Everything working yet? Okay.
Yep.
My name's Danny Connell. I'm an indie app developer and coding instructor on YouTube and Udemy. And you can find my YouTube channel at dannys.link/YouTube. And today I'm going to be telling you how I created a progressive web app with Quasar and integrated the 5 core PWA features, which are home screen installation, pre-caching, caching strategies, background sync, and push notifications. So I'm going to describe what each of these things is and then show you how I integrated each one into the app, roughly speaking. But first, I'll just show you the app that I'm talking about. This app is called Quasargram, and it's an Instagram clone. And you can see it running here in Chrome desktop and on a real Android device as well. And so we have 2 pages in the app. The home page, which displays a list of posts, and each post has an image and a caption, location, and the date the image was posted. And then on the camera page, we can access the user's camera if they give us permission. We can take a photo and enter a caption, and we can find the user's location if they, again, give us permission. And then we can post an image, and then we see that on the home screen. So this app contains all of these 5 features that I'm going to be talking about. So I'll just go through each one at a time. So first one, home screen installation. This is probably the most self-explanatory. Basically, we can prompt the user in some way to install our app, and we can prompt them however we want to. So we could show a banner, or we could show an annoying pop-up, or we can threaten them, tell them that if they don't install it, we'll do bad things to them. Whatever you want to do. But once they click that call to action, we can then trigger the native app installation pop-up. If they click yes on that, then the app will be installed to their home screen, and it'll be installed with a nice native style app icon. And if the user launches the app with that icon, the app will launch in full screen with no browser chrome. They're a much more native app-like experience. Gives them convenience because the icon is on the home screen. And because it's on the home screen, they're much more likely to keep using the app and engaging with it. So how do we set up home screen installation? So the first thing we need is an icon if it's going to be on the home screen, and not just one icon, but we need a bunch of different icons for all the different platforms in different sizes. And we could spend days creating these icons one by one, or we could just use Icon Genie, which is an amazing CLI tool, which will take a source image and generate all the icons we need in all the different sizes. So once you've got Icon Genie installed, which you can find out how to do on the Quasar site, then you need a source icon. So in the root of my project, I have this icon PNG, and this needs to be quite big. So this is 1240 by 1240. And then all we need to do is run a command such as Icon Genie generate -i, and then the path to the icon, the source icon, .png, and then we can pass in any options. So I'm going to pass in the skip trim option, which will stop Icon Genie from cutting out the space around the image. And that's all there is to it. That will generate all the different icons we need. And these will be stored in the public folder. So you can see all these here, and it even generates launch screens and stuff as well. And then the next thing we need to do is set up the manifest file. And this is a JSON file, which we can use to customize our PWA settings, mostly settings around how the app will look. So if I click view source on this app, I'll just search for manifest. You can see this manifest.json file here. If I open that up, you can see this file with all the different settings. And without Quasar, we would have to create this file manually and then link to it. But Quasar will actually generate this for us. So all we need to do is jump to the Quasar config file in the root and jump to this PWA section and then the manifest section. And you can see all the different options here. So we can set the name, short name, description, display mode, which is whether it should be completely full screen or whether it should still have some browser Chrome. And we can set things like theme color. So I've set the theme color here to this dark gray color, which you can see in various places depending on the platform. So for example, on Android, you can see that color at the top of the browser there. And so once you've set up all your manifest options, then we need to listen out for the before prompt install event. So I'm just going to jump to my layout file, which is in source layouts, main layout.vue. And in the mounted hook, I'm just listening out for this before install prompt event. And this will be triggered when the browser is capable of and ready to install the app to the home screen. So this event will only be fired on devices that actually support home screen installation. But once that event is fired, we then need to store that event in a variable because we need it to fire the native installation prompt later. So I'm just stashing it in this deferred prompt variable. And then we need to show some kind of prompt to get the user to install the app. So in the case of Quasar, I'm just showing this blue banner at the bottom, which just says it's Quasar. We can see that on both Chrome and Android because you can actually install Chrome apps on Chrome as a Chrome app instead of to the home screen. And once the user clicks yes on this banner, then I'm triggering this install app method. And we're reaching out to that event that we stored before and just calling this prompt method, and that will just display the native installation prompt. And once the user clicks yes to that, then the app will be installed on their home screen. So I'll just demonstrate this on the Android app. So if I click yes on this banner at the bottom, we're prompted to install the app. And if we click add, then it'll add the app to the home screen. We might need to wait a few seconds for it to appear, but it should appear at the bottom here. Please appear. Yeah, there we go. So that's on the home screen now. We can see our nice icon. And if we launch it with this icon, we see a nice little splash screen with a message on it. And then it launches the app in full screen with no browser Chrome. So home screen installation, fairly straightforward. So let's jump to the next one, which is pre-caching. So what is pre-caching? Well, it allows us to cache all the core files of our app the first time the user visits the app. So all of our core local files, so all of our HTML, CSS, JavaScript, images, whatever it is, we can store that in the user's browser cache so that the next time they visit the app, those resources will be loaded from their browser cache instead of from the network. And this means we get much better performance. Oh, it also means that we can launch the app offline because all of our core files have been stored in the browser. So it can even be launched without an internet connection. So how do we set up pre-caching? Just jump to my code. So without Quasar and without Workbox, and Workbox is Quasar's progressive web app service worker tool of choice, which makes it really easy to work with service workers. And service workers are basically JavaScript files that run in the background of your app. And even if the app is closed, and even if the browser is completely closed, this service worker will keep on running. And we can use it to listen out for all kinds of different events, like fetch events and push events and all sorts of stuff like that. And it's the service worker that makes pre-caching and stuff like that possible. And so if I jump back to the config file, we have two different workbox modes available. So there's generate SW, generate service worker, and inject manifest. The generate SW mode will basically generate a kind of generic service worker for you. You can't edit that, but if you are using that mode and you don't have particularly complex needs, then you don't even need to worry about pre-caching because it comes out of the box. But if you're using the inject manifest mode, where you code your own service worker, then even with that mode, it's really simple to set up pre-caching. So I'll just jump to my service worker file. And if you're in PWA mode, it will generate this source PWA folder, and the service worker is in there. It's just called custom service worker.js. And so to enable precaching, all we need is this one line, which is just firing this precache and root method and passing in this manifest. And that manifest is basically a list of all our local core files. And that is also generated automatically by Workbox. So precaching is really easy to integrate. And the next one is caching strategies. So what are caching strategies? Well, precaching handles the caching of all our local files, all the files that are local to our project. What about external requests? Whether that's a request to an image file or a font file or an API endpoint, we also want to be able to cache those requests as well. But we don't want to cache them in the same way because, for example, something like a font file is rarely going to change. So it makes sense to always grab that request from the cache whenever possible and only grab it from the network when it's absolutely necessary. For example, when there is no font file in the cache. Whereas something like a request to an API endpoint where you always want the latest information, in that case, it makes sense to always grab the request from the network and only fall back to the cache if the network is unavailable or if there is something wrong with the API or something like that. So we have 5 different caching strategies that we can use with Quasar and Workbox. And the 3 main ones are stale while revalidate. With this strategy, the service worker will always try and grab the request from the cache, but then in the background, it will grab the request from the network sort of silently and repopulate the cache with that new request if there's new data there. And this is kind of like it's a good catch-all strategy for most requests because it's fast, because the user gets the request from the cache. And although they might not always have the very latest data or file or whatever it is, they will receive the latest data over time with this strategy. Then we have the cache-first strategy. And in this strategy, the service worker always tries to grab the request from the cache first and only falls back to the network if it can't get it from the cache. So this is good for things like font files, which are not going to change very often. Then we have network first, which is good for API requests and stuff like that. So the service worker will try and grab the request from the network. And if it can't get it from the network, it will fall back to the cache. And then we have 2 lesser used strategies, network only and cache only, which are fairly self-explanatory. So how do we integrate caching strategies? And again, we do this in our service worker file. And without Quasar and Workbox, this would require an enormous amount of code and logic, but Workbox makes this unbelievably simple. All we need to do is fire this register root method, which will set up a new route or a new strategy. And this expects 2 main parameters. The first one is a capture parameter. And this tells Workbox which URLs should be a match for this particular strategy. And you can use a regular expression like this, or you can use an exact string, or you can use something like starts with or ends with to target URLs that start with or end with a particular phrase. And then the second parameter, we just pass in the strategy that we want to use for these URLs that are being matched. So in this case, I have a stale while revalidate strategy for most requests. So this is targeting basically anything that starts with HTTP, so basically most requests. And then I have a network first strategy here, which is targeting my API calls, where we want to get the most up to date information most of the time. And then finally, I just have a cache first strategy for Google fonts, because Google fonts are not likely to change, so we might as well just always load them from the cache whenever we can. And that's all there is to it to set up caching strategies. So again, that's pretty simple. So the next one is background sync. So what is background sync? Well, if pre-caching and caching allow us to make our app performant and make our app launch offline, then background sync allows us to make our app fully functional offline. So let's say a user tries to create a post in our app, but they don't have an internet connection. Well, usually that request would just fail. But with background sync, what we can do is store that request in a queue for later in the user's browser in an IndexedDB database. And then later on, when the internet returns, our service worker will detect that the internet has returned and will begin trying to resend those requests that are stored in the queue one by one. And with a little bit of work, we can even display the data that's contained in the queue and display it in our app. So how do we set this up? Well, the first thing we need to do is create a queue. So I won't describe everything the code is doing here, but basically I'm creating a new queue here. I'm calling it create post queue because this is requests. This is for requests to my API endpoint that creates a new post. And once we've set up a queue, then we need to push requests to that queue that we want to be stored in that queue. So we have I'm listening out for the fetch event here, and the fetch event will be triggered for every request the app makes. So first, we want to make sure that the URL of that request matches up with our create post endpoint URLs in this case. And if it does, then we clone that request essentially, and then push it to the queue that we created above. And if I jump back to the queue, we have this on sync event. And if the user has an internet connection, then the request will be pushed to the queue and then immediately fired off to the network and then removed from the queue. But if the user doesn't have an internet connection, then it will stay in the queue. And then when the internet connection returns, this on sync method will be triggered. And at that point, it will try firing those requests again from the queue. And if a request is successful, it will be removed from the queue. And if it's unsuccessful, then it will be pushed back into the queue. So this is a little bit more complicated than the other things. And I'll just demonstrate this working in the app. So I'm going to simulate being offline in Chrome Desktop by just going to Chrome DevTools and then the network panel. And just changing this option here to offline. So the app is offline here, and I'm going to try and create a post. So I'll take a picture, enter a caption, and enter a location, and click post image. And even though this app is offline, you can see the post we just created within the app here, and it's got this kind of red color, and it's marked as stored offline. And if we go to the application panel, and we go to IndexedDB, and then Workbox background sync, and then this queue, we have a queue here. So this item you see here is the request that we just tried to make, and it's been stored in this queue. And so if I go back to the network panel and go back online again, and if you just look at this, I'll just stretch this out a bit. If you just look at this post here that's currently marked as stored offline, I'll set this back to online. And you can see that's now changed to white again. And if we jump back to the queue in the IndexedDB database and refresh that, you see that item has been removed from the queue because that's now been pushed off to the network and our post has been added to the database. So background sync really allows us to give the user a full app experience, even if they're having internet issues and stuff like that. Okay, so the final thing I want to talk about is push notifications. So we need to prompt the user to subscribe to push notifications in some way. And again, we can do that any way we want. We can use a banner or a pop-up or whatever. But once they've subscribed, we can create a subscription for them. And once they have a subscription, we can send native notifications to our subscribed users anytime we like. And we can even send these notifications to our users if they have the app completely closed, and even if they have the browser completely closed, they can still receive these messages. And if the user taps a notification, we can open up our app for them, and we can even open up the app on a particular page. So push notifications really help us to keep bringing our users back into our app, which means more engagement, which is good for us as the app developer. So how do we integrate push notifications? So first of all, we need to prompt the user in some way. So I just have this banner, which is just a Q banner at the top. Would you like to enable notifications? If the user clicks yes on that, then just jump to my homepage component, source pages, page home. If they click that yes button, then this enable notifications method is fired. First, I'm just checking if notifications is supported on that particular browser. And if it is, I just fire this notification.request permission method, which will trigger the native dialog, which asks for notifications permission. And if they click yes to that, then first of all, I check for an existing push subscription, because if they already have one, we don't want to create another one. So I'm doing that by reaching out to the service worker and this push manager thing to get any existing subscriptions. And if they don't have a subscription, we then create one. And we create one by using this push manager.subscribe method. And we need to pass this fancy key in here because we need to use some keys to secure our push subscriptions. But I won't get too much into that now. But once this is successful, it will return a subscription object. And this subscription object will contain some keys, and it will contain, most importantly, a URL. And that's the URL that we need to send our push messages to in order to get a message to that particular user, to that particular browser and device combination. So we need to store this object somewhere if we actually want to send push notifications to this person later on, which is why I'm then passing that subscription object to my backend here, where I'm saving that subscription object to the database. And I'll just jump to my backend now and to my create post endpoint, which is fired whenever someone creates a post. So after that post has been created, which is here, I then fire this send push notification method, and this will grab all of those subscription objects that we stored in our database in this subscriptions collection and loop through them one by one and configure a push notification and then send the push notification using the web push library. And then we need to listen out for that push notification before we can actually display one. And again, we do that in the service worker. So if I go to custom service worker.js, scroll down, we have a push event that we're listening out for here. So this will be triggered whenever our service worker receives a push message. And because our service worker keeps on running, even if our app is closed, that's why we're able to display push notifications to users, even if they have the app closed. So this event will then receive the push notification, which we sent from our backend to the relevant push server, because all the different browsers have their own push servers. Then it'll be sent on to this service worker, and then we just set up a notification and then display it to the user with this show notification method. And I'll just demonstrate this working in the app. So, and to show that it works even if the app is closed, I'm just going to close the Android version. I'll close this completely. And first of all, I need to enable notifications on desktop. So I'm going to click yes on this banner here. Then I'll click allow. And we should see, we see an initial notification which just says you're subscribed to notifications. And now whenever we create a post, we should get a push notification. So I'll create a post now, take a picture, enter a caption, and add my location. Click on post image, and we see the notification there on desktop says new Quasar post. And if I close the app on desktop and click this notification, see that it opens up our app again on the home page. And if we look at the Android version, even though the app is completely closed, if we look at the top here, we can see a little camera icon, and that's from our app. And also, if we look at the app icon, you can see it's got a notification there. And if we swipe down to notifications, we can see we have push notification, which says new Quasar post. And if we open this up, it will even show the image that was posted. And if we click on this push notification, then it will open up the app on the home screen again. So that's about it for push notifications. And that's about it from me. So that's basically, in a nutshell, how I created Progressive Web App with all of these core features, PWA features. And if you want to learn how to create this app, this Quasar app, there's a course that should be out in, if not July 2020, then August 2020. And if you don't want to miss that, go to dannys.link/Quasar.PWA.
All right, Danny. Awesome presentation. A lot about PWA there. And also, it's obviously quite an interesting topic because we got quite a few questions. So hopefully we get to some yes and no's, so maybe they'll be quick.
Yeah.
One question is from a couple people. Is this open source? So can people look at what you've done here, or is it part of your course, or can people see this code?
Yeah, it's part of the course. I don't know. I may put the code on a repo at some point. I'm not sure, but it'll definitely be available in the course. So basically, at the end of every module, I'll provide the code for up to that point in the course. So.
Okay, so if you want to see the code and use the code, you want to take part in Danny's course. Next question is from Bezan Sela. He's asking about animated icons. Do you know if there's a way to also add them into Quasar, like the animated app icon of Netflix?
As in the actual icon that sits on the home screen?
Yeah.
As in animating that?
Yeah, animating it. Is that possible through Quasar? Or
I didn't even know that was a thing, to be honest. Because I mean, I'm an iOS user, and I've never seen an animated icon on iOS, so I assume that's an Android thing. But yeah, I didn't even know that was possible. So that's definitely something to look into.
Maybe it's the splash screen that they're talking about too. So when you open up the app, you get the splash screen that might be animated. I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah. Again, I don't know how to create animated splash screens, but yeah, it may well be possible.
All right. Next question is from Anton Cherry. He's asking, and I guess this is maybe your opinion about the Quasar documentation when it comes to PWA. Is it a good in your opinion? As he's asking, and of course, Anton got his Danny's training or course that you can go to for sure. But the docs, how would you say are they? Are they get your feet wet type of docs, or does it explain a little bit more? Or
I think, if I'm honest, I think it could do with a little bit of work because yeah, I struggled to get very far with PWA mode. I kind of got started from the docs, but I actually needed a lot of help from the Quasar community. So guys like Callow and Jeff and Yusuf. Yeah, so maybe it could do with a bit of work. Maybe that's something I could help out with a little bit now that I've got my feet wet with it. But yeah, PWAs are quite complicated, I would say. So yeah, maybe we could work on that a little bit.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And I think the intention of the docs is to get people rolling. But yeah, it's not a full featured. It tells you how to do everything with PWAs. It gets you started with Quasar, but learning how to do PWAs is not part of the docs.
Yeah, so it doesn't tell you much about Workbox, which is what you're mainly using with PWA mode. And to be honest, the Workbox documentation isn't that great. So yeah, if we could put a little bit about Workbox and how to achieve the various things like background sync and caching and stuff, yeah, that would be helpful.
Sure. Yep. Next question is from Salvador Santander Gutierrez. When do you recommend to make a PWA web app instead of a simple SPA web app? Is there, let's say, a main purpose why you'd go with the PWA instead of an SPA?
Well, I think the main reason to use a PWA is because it gives the user, in many different ways, it gives the user a more native app-like experience. So for one, they can install it to the home screen with a nice icon, so they're much more likely to keep using it. Two, it will launch in full screen, which again is more like a native app, so it's a better experience for the user. And three, we can make it fully functional offline. So even if the internet is disconnected, we can still do core functionality, like creating posts and stuff like that. So if you want all of those things, then it makes sense to use PWA, I would say.
All right. One last question. Question is from Dastin123. Can I use the caching stuff also if the user didn't add the app or the PWA to their home screen?
Yeah, everything will still work, even if the app is not on their home screen. As long as they visited it in the browser and they've clicked on enable push notifications, then yeah, it should all still work. The push notifications will work and the caching will work, because just by visiting the app in the browser, the service worker will be installed and will start doing its thing. So yeah, it doesn't need to be on the home screen for all that stuff to work.
All right. Cool. So those are the questions. Danny, thanks so much for your time. Awesome. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Danny is the last guest that we have, and now we're going to turn to our core team. So Danny, I'll let you go.
Cheers. See you later.